Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking the Game podcast. Y'all know me, I'm Stephen Gillespie, but joining me now is Jurg and Coney, filling in for Austin Carr today. Jurg, what's up, man?
Nothing much, Steven. Nothing much. I'm greatly excited to be on today. You were telling me, as always, whenever I come on, like you tell me what's going on, give me a little preview. I'm excited every single time. And once again, I'm excited again. I've had a very eventful weekend, which is kind of apropos because I'm about to have an eventful month, and I'm excited to end off my weekend joining you.
Yeah, and at the end of the show, I'd love for you to plug all the new fun and exciting stuff that you have going on. And I would also like to tell everyone Happy Easter. I hope that you guys all enjoyed your Easter. I myself had a really good time with the family and everything. Jurg, I trust that your weekend was pretty fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to do a little bit of commentary. My college that I graduated from, that I'm an alumni, and I had a pretty chill Sunday. Watched the Marvel movie today, so that was plenty of fun.
Oh, that's what's up. What Marvel movie?
So like I'm very new to watching the movie, so I'm going back at like the ones that I've seen a lot of like funny clips of. And today I watched Civil War, and that was a banger. that was a
Civil
banger.
War is pretty dope. I enjoy that one as well. All right, so before we get into our show today, we do have a very special guest, Kenneth Cotterill, who is a part of the Shoot or Shoot basketball podcast. Before we bring him on, I want to remind everybody that support for this show is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. You're looking and talking to two of them right now. And we have an exclusive offer for our listeners today, Jurg. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code BTG at manscaped.com. Jurg, what do you think about that deal, man?
I mean, it sounds absolutely awesome. You're telling me that you are getting the perfectly engineered tools, precision, no nicks, no cuts. I've never had a cut when I've used Manscaped. It is precision. It is perfect. It is what you need to treat yourself properly any day of the year.
That's 100% right. You were talking to me about how you were watching, Marvel movies. Just to quote our friend Thanos from the Avengers, is perfect. That land mower 3.0 is perfectly balanced as all things should be.
Yes.
All right. So without further ado, we're going to bring on our friend Kenneth Cotterill of the Shoot or Shoot basketball podcast. Kenneth, what's going on, my man?
Oh, not too much. We've got a little bit of a quarantine situation up here in Regina, so I've been in my house for the last number of days. So it's good to finally interact with human beings, even if it is over a live video. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, man, it's our pleasure, Jurgen. We were talking before the show. We're so excited to have Kenneth on. He does a lot of great work, another basketball mind. And you said that you're from where, Kenneth?
Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. One of the prairie's golden cities, that's for sure. So, yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I've never been up there myself, Jurg. Have you been up towards Canada?
I have not, but I think it's about 2 weeks ago at this point. Myself and the president of Off the Ball Network, Chris LeBron, we did a interview with Rod Peterson, former play-by-play commentator for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and it was an awesome show to do. So I'm very glad. I love talking to Canadians, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Canadians love talking to a Southern gentleman like myself. So, I mean, it's a win-win all the way. There you go. All right, so Kenneth, before we get going into some of the big news that's been coming out of the NBA, I want you to just kind of let everyone know what kind of got you into podcasting yourself and kind of what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure. So roughly 2 years ago, some buddies of mine here in Regina, actually, they started their own baseball podcast, the 3 Batter Minimum. They were really into it, and I listened every week, and I'm like, I'd been giving it thought for many years, like, why am I not doing something in regards to sports? I've been a huge basketball guy my entire life, and so a buddy of mine came to me asking the same thing, and then we just kind of decided from there that we wanted to start our own podcast, and so end of June of 2019, we started the Shoot or Shoot basketball podcast. I've had 3 different co-hosts. I've had countless guests. I've now got a producer for the show and everything. And ultimately, the biggest reward of podcasting has definitely been the relationships that you build, because given that I am in Regina, Saskatchewan, there's not a lot of that happening here. We have our own Saskatchewan podcast network, but as far as finding other people who are interested in basketball and and coming on shows and everything. I mean, it's tough to find here. And so it's been so rewarding being able to meet so many people along the way, yourselves included, getting to meet up with my childhood idol and JJ Redick to do an episode. I mean, just that alone is worth all the hours put in and everything. And so that's how I got started in podcasting. I've loved it ever since and don't see myself slowing down.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to not do that. You do a lot of great work, and you've given me the great honor to come on your show. And, you know, when that happened, I was looking for the opportunity to do the same thing for you. So thank you so much for the opportunity to go on a podcast that has hosted JJ Redick. I'm truly honored, Kenneth. It means a lot to me, man.
For sure.
All right. So, Jurg, any questions for our guy Kenneth here about the Shoot or Shoot podcast on your end?
Well, kind of one of the background things, because I definitely one of the things he said there that I think is very relatable for anyone in podcasting is, you know, before you actually start the podcast, the thought that goes into it, it's like, well, what if it doesn't do so well? What I for myself in my college years, there was a lot of kind of fear and things like that. What was that? I know you said your friend brought it up to you, and that was one of the things. Like, what was that final thought process before you eventually got podcasting going? Is it just like, okay, let's just see where this goes? Like, what was the mental break there?
I think for me, it was just finally putting the foot down of like, why am I sitting around listening to other people talk about sports? And I would get frustrated myself listening to people on ESPN that are just there for the hot takes. And I'm like, where are the shows for like the real analysis of fans that watch the game? And, you know, while they may have a little bit of bias, you know, they don't let it get in the way. And so I think it was just putting my foot down and finally deciding that it was something that I wanted to pursue. I talked to the guys at Three Batter Minimum to ask them all about where they got mics, where they hosted, how they did it and everything. And, you know, you go back and listen to episode 1 and you're like, wow, what a long way I've come from. I think a lot of people can relate to that. If you're ever,
yes, sir.
if you're a podcaster, go back and listen to those first couple episodes and then listen to some of your more recent ones. And I'm sure you'll notice how much more comfortable you are. I mean, episode 1, I had like 10 pages of notes. I was just like all ready to go. Like, oh no, I messed up that stat. And it's like, you know, none of that matters. It's ultimately about people getting to know you and getting to know your overall content and what you like to talk about. And so that's what it was for me.
That's awesome, man. And yeah, I can totally relate to I listened to my first episode. I think it was like 2 or 3 months ago. I was like, oh my goodness. And one of the things that you didn't touch on that I'm sure that you're going to, as soon as I mention it, you're going to be like, oh man, me too, was the editing portion, right? Like you wanted to get rid of the ums and the breaks and the, you know, conversations of people talking, like how I just had like a little half-second pause there. I would go on, you know, my editing site and try to get all of that out and try to make it as, I guess, concise and precise as possible. And I don't do any of that now, you know, unless it's like a uber major mess up. I won't even edit any of that stuff out.
The only thing I will actually edit is if connections cut out or things like that. I mean, I've had that before where a guest cuts out for an entire portion of them talking about something. And so that's where the real work comes into it. But I mean, the ums, the ahs, I mean, that's how I talk in everyday life. And that's why personally, I don't edit any of that stuff out because I feel like it's not authentically me. I mean, I don't get paid for a living to go on ESPN and do this. And so ultimately, it's a passion of mine. I love doing it. And if someone's really going to comment and say, wow, you really say or ah a lot, then it's like, well, then you've missed the entire point of my show and you can go and find another podcast.
I had someone comment while I was actually live and say, you know, you say the word, you know, a lot, right? And like, it really frustrated me.
And I'm sure that helped you the rest of the show to not
really
say that word, right?
Frustrated me. I'm not going to lie. And I make a cautious effort to not say, you know, so much anymore. So, I mean, you know, we got to kind of move on from that now. Ha ha. I'm a dad. I love telling dad jokes. Sometimes he laughs. But Kenneth, I really appreciate your authenticity here and just how upfront you were in telling me that, man. And, you know, I love the Shoot or Shoot Basketball podcast. It was such a blast being on, and you do a really, really great job with your platform, brother.
I really do appreciate that. For me, it's ultimately what my peers think of it more than anything else. You know, I've got those DMs from people. How dare you, Canadian, talk about basketball? You know,
That's
I've
so
got
trash.
I've got those
Sorry.
DMs before. Didn't even give it a second thought. Just threw it in the old delete, and then of course a couple hours later, I'm getting messages like "Love the show," and those are the ones that ultimately mattered. So, thanks for having me on.
Oh man, we're thrilled to have you. And so with that being said, I want to roll into some of the news that's been, trickling out of the NBA over the past week or so. And which, by the way, doesn't it seem like the news out of the NBA has been kind of slow recently after coming out of the All-Star break? Like, do you feel that way at all?
Yeah, it has been pretty slow. I mean, outside of that trade deadline, which was pretty hectic for about, 6 hours there, it felt like. Outside of that, I think a lot of injuries to star players has kind of affected that. When you don't have players like LeBron, Embiid, guys like that out there, I think, things can slow down for sure because people aren't focusing on the stars as much, and so they're like, "Oh, my guy's not playing. Well, then I'm not gonna watch." And it's a shame when people do that. I mean, I'm a Lakers fan. I'm wearing the hat, and we got 2 All NBA players that haven't been playing, but I still tuned in to watch us get beat down by the Clippers this afternoon. So.
And we talked offline that, Kyle Kuzma put up a 30-piece over the Kings and got y'all win. So, kind of roll with the punches a little bit there. But, Jurg, I'm sure that you've paid attention to this too, man. The buyout market has received a lot of criticism lately. And I have been saying that stuff like this really doesn't come up unless someone is standing in, Kenneth, cover your ears real quick, opposite of LeBron James's goatness and his quest to be the best basketball player of all time. I feel like that's when stories like this come out. I mean, the Nets, they added an aging LaMarcus Aldridge and looked like washed Blake Griffin, so to speak, according to how he used to be. And all of a sudden, DeAndre Jordan has returned to being an all-NBA center again, once they traded away the guy that he was playing behind. So with the buyout market, though, the Nets obviously added a lot of depth to their front court, which was actually a position in need. It's not like they had an embarrassment of riches there. What do you kind of think of the way that the buyout market has been, what it's evolved to? And do you possibly see any rules or anything coming out to kind of legislate this at all?
So it's very interesting because I was actually on my own podcast that I do separate from Off the Ball Network. Like this was brought up for a bit, and with the buyout market, like my thing is that like to an extent what you said, like I don't think it really gets brought up as an issue until the rich get richer in it. Like when a team, like let's say in free agency, when a team signs a veteran sharpshooter to help to bring more shooting, if it's that mid-level team, it's viewed as a good move. Mm-hmm. For a championship contender, like I'm a Heat fan, so like we made those moves during the Big Three era. We were criticized for that. It's like, why you guys got the Big Three? What else do you need? Like, so it's a very like, if one team benefits from it, you're fine, but then a certain class of team. So I definitely understand why people want to have an issue with it. Like my thing is, until it is a widely complained about issue, I just don't know if the Board of Governors and the NBA Players Association are going to make too much of a big deal of that. Because I especially don't think the Players Association, because you think of a guy like a Blake Griffin, like think about it, he didn't sign with Detroit. He was traded to Detroit. He had no reason to even give them any money back when it came to the buyout, but he did that just because he wanted to leave. I think LaMarcus Aldridge, I know technically he signed with San Antonio, but eventually, even in that first year, there were talks of like, should San Antonio get rid of him? So at the end of the day, like, I think I don't think you could take away the buyouts per se, but if you want to try to do something where there's maybe a little bit more of a penalty to make teams not want to do that, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, the owners love money, right? So if you can make it more of a financial burden on teams to buy out guys, maybe on certain kinds of contracts, like if you signed a player to one of those Rose Rule contracts, or you got a guy on one of the Rose Rule contracts, and you can't trade him, make it more of a financial burden if you have to buy him out. Like Detroit has been just stop paying Josh Smith, like something like that to maybe make teams not want to do that. But aside from that, like I just don't know if it's going to be brought up as an issue. I mean, if it is, like, if it is, it is. But I don't see it being brought to the league.
Okay, now Kenneth, I had you cover your ears. I'm sure that you heard what I said anyway. But you as a Laker fan, right? And I know that you're an honest analyst. You're not going to be blinded by purple and gold. You're going to look through. You're not going to look through even rose-colored lenses. You're going to look through it, as unbiasedly as you possibly can. when you saw the Brooklyn Nets add these moves, did you look at it as a Laker fan saying, now look, they're just trying to stop LeBron James? I'm sure you didn't, but I would just love to kind of get your take on how you viewed the Nets acquiring these players, and do you see it as an issue?
I don't really see it as a major issue. I mean, big market teams are definitely going to benefit from this, unless you were LeBron in Cleveland. I mean, he himself is just an attraction when it came to the buyout market. But typically when it comes to like the buyout market, a lot of big names change hands, but like the production doesn't really go along with it. I mean, I remember when everyone made a fuss over Darren Williams going to Cleveland. Well, Darren Williams, I mean, he was a shell of himself when he went there. This year felt a little bit different when it came to Blake and Drummond, I think, because it felt like they still had quite a bit to give. They just might have been in the wrong situations. I mean, Drummond, like this year, has had countless 20 and 20 games.
Mm-hmm.
Like this guy is not washed. He's barely 30, I think. Blake Griffin, on the other hand, I mean, if you look at Detroit's offseason, they brought in a whole bunch of bigs and basically replaced him. So what's he supposed to think? Like, well, you guys traded for me and then you went and added other players anyways. And these teams decide to buy out these players. I think if they were smart, they would have tried to keep their cards a little bit closer to their chest, maybe try and actually trade these guys instead of buying them out and getting nothing for it. I just look at the buyout market overall. I think Brooklyn definitely is going to benefit from a guy like Aldridge. He has the playoff experience. He's not going to be scoring like 30 points in a playoff game or anything crazy. Could he give you 15 on a night where you really need it? Possibly. The Blake could do the exact same thing, and Drummond could do the same for the Lakers. So I think the only way to really, implement something for buyouts would be you would have to put the cards on the table of, okay, if a small market team, let's say hypothetically New Orleans, offered Andre Drummond $10 million to come and play for them, then that has to be disclosed and the Lakers would have to match that. Because it seems like guys are taking pay cuts in order to go a lot of these places, and I'm not a fan of the pay cut thing. Like, it's just something that's never really sat well with me. I'm all for players making their money, but that's the only thing that I could really see as far as buyouts go. I don't know how else you really control the buyout market.
So one theory I have is, if you view the buyout theory as a problem, I particularly don't. But if you do, make it to where you can't buy them out in the regular season. Wait until the off season to where you have to buy out a player, because then it's actually, I understand that you're probably losing quote unquote value if you do that, because the way that the salary works, right, it could be all guaranteed, but they get it incrementally, that being the players throughout the entire year. So if you buy out the player midway through the season, another team has to guarantee his contract, right, throughout the rest of the year. You're not paying both of them. So I understand that teams would probably lose a little bit of money. But my thing is, too, is if you're like, well, why? How come the big market teams are the ones getting these players? So it's because the small market teams pay them these ridiculous contracts to play at that location. They no longer want them there, right? I mean, Cleveland with Andre Drummond, they signed him, or they didn't sign, but they traded for him from the Detroit Pistons, who signed him to a ridiculous contract. They got him, and then they traded for his eventual replacement in Jarrett Allen. So once you do that, you have your, center of the future in Allen. And if you play Drummond, you're just hampering his minutes, and that doesn't work with your timeline the way it is right now. So it doesn't make sense for them just to keep Drummond and slow down Allen's development, or keep Drummond and let him sit on the bench for the rest of the season. He wants to go play somewhere else. So there's another side of the coin that people aren't talking about. It's like, oh, well, all these big market teams, they just benefit from this. Well, the small market teams are the ones signing them and then cutting them. You know what I mean? So it's kind of the other side of it that doesn't really get talked about a lot. But I do appreciate y'all's comments and views on the buyout market. And I'm glad I'm not alone in not looking at it as an issue, because it's just like anything else. It's like free agency. It's just like a draft. It's kind of the luck of the draw, essentially. So, all right, Kenneth, we got a guy by the name of Kevin Durant. You probably have heard of him since you're a basketball podcaster. He got into a spat with the kind of an actor, comedian, sports fan, and Michael Rappaport on social media privately. He used insensitive language that Rappaport eventually did share publicly. Durant was fined $50,000 for said language. I'm kind of curious to get your viewpoint on this, and I'm not trying to turn this into a race related show. I just think that it's interesting that around 3 weeks ago, Myers Leonard made anti-Semitic language. So then you get into a weird discussion of which is worse, homophobic or anti-Semitic. It's a really weird, rabbit hole to fall down on. But he did this on Twitch and was also fined $50,000. But he was also suspended, Jurg, by your Miami Heat. He was then subsequently traded to Oklahoma City and waived and is likely never to play again. So, Kenneth, I'm kind of curious on your thoughts of the exchange. Do you have an issue with Rappaport making them public? Did he violate some sort of unwritten code here? Like, how do you view this?
So I want to start by saying the NBA should have fined Kevin Durant. They did a good job in actually fining him for it. He shouldn't be speaking to anyone that way, regardless of, for anyone that follows Michael Rappaport, if they're bringing you on First Take and Skip and Shannon all the time, probably not bringing you on because you're a great analyst. They're bringing you on because you get clicks. And so you should be more aware of who it is as well. If you're Kevin Durant, Rappaport shouldn't have made those messages public. I will say that. I think that's something that could have been handled internally between the two of them. Rappaport, I don't like playing the victim because, he continually goes after NBA players. If you've ever seen him on those shows, he blatantly disrespects LeBron and Kevin Durant constantly whenever he goes on those shows. He seems to get a pass every time he does it. I'm not someone who likes to give someone a pass when you constantly give people bad nicknames and try and make them out to be these villains and everything. They're people too, and I don't think that it's right that he does that. And then he also tries to be their buddies when they're at games together, and that's the other thing that's, the two-faced thing that I'm just not a huge fan of either. But unfortunately, we see this all the time in sports. Different players are held to different standards. Whether it's fair or not, it's just kind of the way that the league has always worked. When you look at a player of Kevin Durant's caliber, they're not going to trade him and cut him if it means because of his quality. That's what it is. He's an MVP caliber guy when he's playing, and he's a guy that could bring Brooklyn a championship. Myers Leonard isn't that guy. And so, if Myers Leonard did that, same thing probably would have happened that happened with his anti-Semitic language. So I don't think it's fair the way that it goes, but it's just kind of the way that the league has always worked, and I don't know how they could rectify it.
Yeah, and oddly enough, I had a weird conversation with my kids today, and I basically got to the point that, fair is not a real thing. But, that's a conversation for a different day. So, Jurg, kind of want to pose the same question to you. I mentioned Myers Leonard. I know that you're familiar with that situation. I want to kind of prelude this by saying or touch on what Kenneth just put out. Like, Michael Rappaport is a dude that is I remember him from the TV show Boston Public that used to be on Fox Television a while back ago. That's the last thing I remember seeing him in actor-wise, so I think that they're using the term actor loosely here. But this is a guy that kind of rides the coattails of other celebrities in order to maintain an image of sorts. Here, we don't know if he's really a Knicks fan, a Net fan, a Celtics fan, like what other New England team is up there. What do you kind of think of the exchange between the two and how both of the gentlemen handled it?
I agree with Kenneth. I don't think he should have shown the conversation. I think a private conversation, we always talk about it with sports in general. It's always talk about being like every time we talk about the NBA compared to college, it's a man's league. Hollywood, it's a man's thing. Like, so if you're in this quote unquote man's thing that you always talk about, like handle this like men, handle this internally like real men would. If we have a problem, we're going to handle it one-on-one, mano v mano. And at the end of the day, that's how it should be. I don't think, I know it gets very tricky. Obviously, I don't think there's going to be anything with libel or slander or whatever would technically be the term that's more proper here. But it's like with these two being public figures, I kind of understand why it's a little bit different. But at the same time, it's just not the right thing to do there. And like you guys said, with KD in that convo with him, at the end of the day, like you got to understand who you're talking to. Like you got to know certain situations, like the words you're saying to this person, how likely is it to come back and bite you? Kind of to the point that you allude to, Stephen, with Myers Leonard. Like, it's all about situational awareness. And I think a lot of these guys even being over a decade in, like KD was, and Myers Leonard, I forget what year he was drafted, but I think he's been in the league at least 7, 8, 9 years at this point. Like it's the situational awareness that these guys are just not taught at a young age, that even as they grow older, like they may understand in certain points, but like they think that in just streaming a game or in a conversation with someone that they know personally, because obviously whatever their relationship is, whether they're actually friends or not, or enemies, like they know each other. So whatever you may think the status is of whatever you're doing, you need to understand that at any point what you said, it could be documented, it could be recorded, and you just need to be better situationally. And I think a lot of professional athletes are not properly equipped to that from the point when they bring it to the league. Like I think the NFL, I'm sure the other leagues do, but I think the NFL is the only league that kind of has this rookie minicamp, to where it's like, you remember this, Steven, like the clips of Herm Edwards like talking to rookies. It's like, be smart. Phone, it gets everything. Don't do anything stupid. Don't say anything stupid, like things like that. Like these leagues just don't do that for these guys.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because I mean, I'm a Kevin Durant, fan. If I'm putting aside being a real analyst and making, informed and unbiased opinions, I'll criticize Kevin Durant like I'm going to now. But I just want to I'm a Kevin Durant fan, so I feel like it's okay for me to say he's not really the most socially aware when it comes to social media. He's kind of developed a reputation of not necessarily handling himself the best when it comes to his social media accounts and things like that. So, I mean, when he got to the point to where he was making comments like, "Oh, you lawyered up," and then he still kept going, like, "Okay, dude, like you're kind of asking for it at this point." So, I just kind of want to touch on a little bit real quick about what you guys said. Like, I agree with you that Rappaport shouldn't have made those comments public, but at the end of the day, Kevin Durant's responsible for Kevin Durant's commentary, and I'm sure that you guys agree with that as well. If Kevin Durant doesn't want people to think the worst of him and think that he does have some sort of, anti, homosexual worldview or whatever like that, that's up to him. It's not up to the guy that he's insulting to kind of keep his character intact for him. That's kind of where I lie on that. I don't know if you guys want to touch on that real quick before we move on.
Oh no, I think you're right in terms of the words he's using. I think conversationally, I think if we just like broad brush of a conversation, like if Steven, if you and me, if we have a bad convo between us, like one day, if one of us was in a bad mood, like we're going to keep it internal, like we're not going to release it. But if neither of us use like, terrible language, then it's a non-issue. I think, like you said, KD exactly, there's just no need to use these words anymore.
If Kevin Durant handled himself like a professional, then they wouldn't have been posted.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it boils down to, is he should have known better in what he was saying. I still don't agree with it going public, but yeah, you're an adult. You have to realize that any of us working a job, if things like that came out and it got back to our boss, there would be consequences for that. And I think sometimes athletes forget that they aren't above that sort of criticism that everyday people would have to go through themselves.
Yeah, and making comments that are detrimental to you, your team, and ultimately the league that puts money in your pocket, probably not a good look. All right, and speaking of something that may or may not be a good look, Kenneth, I'm really interested to get your comment on here, and I promise we're not going to grill you, because I know that JJ Redick is one of your favorites, right? You've actually had him on your show. I know that he has meant a great deal to you as an NBA fan, but that's kind of the reason why I want to ask you this question, because to me, this is a side of JJ Redick that I've never really seen before. And I also want to say, Kenneth, that I love the fact that he is an active NBA player and he podcasts. I mean, how many times do we say, "Oh, I wish we could know what's going on inside of LeBron James's head," or "Oh, I wish we could know what's going on inside of Kyrie Irving's head," if we're ready for that, if the world is ready for knowing exactly what Kyrie Irving's thinking, right? So JJ Redick made some comments on his show and was pretty candid about the whole departure that he had from the New Orleans Pelicans when it came to the trade deadline. He was dealt to the Dallas Mavericks, who is a couple thousand miles, away from the location that he wanted to go. There was, he has family that's in the Brooklyn area. He also would have liked to play for maybe, the Celtics or the Sixers again, maybe even the Knicks, who knows? But ultimately, the Pelicans dealt him to Dallas. Now, JJ said on his show, Kenneth, that basically gave him his word, right? That he would deal him to a location that suited him best. Ultimately, Dallas wasn't where he wanted to go, But now he's kind of saying, okay, like apparently he's talked to Mark Cuban and said, hey, look, I know I made these comments. I'm willing and ready to play for you guys. I'm really just ready to move past this. So Kenneth, as a fellow podcaster, as a Redick guy, how did you kind of digest his comments that he made public?
So I got the alert on my phone about it, and then I went and watched the full clip. I don't like to read like the single headline. I mean, the full clip is like 18 minutes long, and so JJ kind of explained the entire side of the story. He even told Mark Cuban, he's like, any other year I would be incredibly excited to be coming to Dallas. Like, it's one of the best places in the NBA to play. Just I've seen my family like twice in the last 6 months. I've got 2 young kids. And so for me, situationally, it's not somewhere that I really wanted to go. I think his main concern is that he had an understanding with David Griffin. Also,
Griffin, I'm sorry. I always say, I don't know why, but I always think Danny Ferry when I think David Griffin, and I don't know why. It's just a mental thing that I have. But yes, David Griffin.
I know, right? But I mean, he had an understanding with David Griffin as well as Trajan Langdon. I mean, those guys are both Duke guys as well. So I think he felt, whether it was naive in thinking it or not, because the NBA is a business, but I think he felt like he would get the honesty from a guy that he's known for a long time. And the understanding was, you'll buy me out so that way I can be closer to my kids, because JJ really doesn't have anything else to prove in his career. He's made millions of dollars. He's lasted way longer than anyone ever thought JJ Redick was going to last in the NBA. Most people were writing him off when he was in Orlando. I mean, he had the whole DUI situation. He struggled his first couple of years in the league. I mean, it's well documented stuff, what he was going through. And then for him to even have the career that he's had is pretty outstanding. But I mean, I think he's just frustrated overall that they couldn't be honest with him. I mean, he signed there. He was basically their veteran guy, and it was him and a bunch of young bucks. And when he didn't get that honesty, I mean, also Tommy Alter was the one who asked him the question as co-host, and it was a very direct question that he asked him, and I think that's why JJ answered it pretty candidly. I don't think there was any malicious intent behind it. I think it was just him being honest, of saying, I just think that, if anyone's looking to go to New Orleans, then your agents, they may not be completely transparent with you. And so I think it's more so a warning to any potential free agents that may decide to go there. I didn't have any major issue with it. I mean, as you said, he's never really been that outspoken. His podcast, for the most part, he has the other people kind of have those hot takes, and he's always been a professional in the league. So I didn't take major issue with it. I don't blame him for wanting to be closer to his kids when he's in year 15 of his career, or 14. Like, he wanted to be close to home. And people would say, well, of course, he just wants to go to Brooklyn like everyone else. Well, I mean,
who doesn't?
Who doesn't want to go to Brooklyn? And also, if you can see your family along the way, it's kind of a win-win situation. And when you have an understanding that you're going to be bought out, and then that happens, I'd be pretty pissed off too.
Yeah, and see, I hear all of that, Kenneth. And Jurg, I want to pose this to you now. He signed probably for the most money that I think, personally, would have got compared to any other team that was willing to acquire JJ Redick. And that's kind of been like when the Sixers signed him to the contract that they did, I was really surprised that he was able to command that much amount of money. No knock against JJ and his skill set, but when I looked at the amount of money that he signed for, I was like, dang, they're paying him like he's going to be part of a big three or something, and just to me at that point in JJ's career, he's just not that guy. He's very, very valuable, can contribute to a winning team and has winning skill set. But it just seemed to me that New Orleans was kind of that same way, that he was going to get, he got the bag, and that's the strategy in the NBA today. You get the bag first and then you worry about everything else second. And whenever he didn't get to go to one of those Northeastern teams, he made the comment. And Kenneth, I also want to ask you this when Jurg is done. But Jurg, do you think that there's any sort of repercussions that NBA owners would look at a situation like this and say, hey, look, JJ is making comments that maybe not everybody is thinking, but because they're out there now, maybe now people are starting to think about it, to where maybe we are hampered in our ability to bring in free agents? What do you think, Jurg?
Well, I think it would be a very tough sell for the owners to try to do that because at the end of the day, he didn't do this during an interview. He did not do this during a contractually, because the NBA has contracts with like networks and stuff like that. And so he didn't do it on any of that. He did it on his own platform. If you're going to get to the point, I know we just finished talking about Kevin Durant and his comments on social, but it's a very different thing between a private conversation being linked with you using terms and talking in such an aggressive manner to him on his own platform that he created, his own podcast. Like I don't even think the NBA Players Association would stand for that, because I think at that point it creates a whole other issue that I don't think the league would want to go to, especially because I know like he hasn't said anything necessarily like bad or to this level, but like LeBron with all the stuff he has, like I'm sure obviously I know JJ Redick and LeBron, two different star statuses, but
right.
If they could find JJ Redick, if they find Kevin Durant, LeBron's like, I'm not going to let this happen, because if I accidentally slip up, you are not doing anything to me. So I don't think it can get to that point where you can find guys for comments that they made. And I think at the end of the day, like, I think just the issue is that this wasn't an official statement that, like, the thing with the leagues is that when a statement gets out there and they don't get to vet it, they don't try to get to control it, it gets them angry. You look at, I think a year ago or maybe 2 years ago now in the NFL, when the Players Association released the report of issues that were going on down in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization, and the fact that that whole thing was left unchecked, that the Jaguars were not doing right by their players, forcing them to have to go to optional workouts, keyword optional workouts. Like, there's just certain points to where it's like you can't get in these players' business, because now it's like you're changing the personal side of this thing, and there needs to be that balance between it. I don't think JJ necessarily crossed the line, because I think at the end of the day, I know we understand this, but your word is your bond. And for a guy like JJ Redick, or for what happened between the Pelicans and JJ, like, can we really say, like, I know he's gone vocal with it, but it's like, are we really surprised to hear this about the organization that had a franchise superstar big man and couldn't convince anybody to get there for even a year, for 7 to 8 years, and then had to trade him? Like,
well, that was prior, just to be fair, that was prior to David Griffin being, president of basketball operations.
Right. But I think the thing is that, like, and maybe in the context, maybe, of course, he was talking because David Griffin was the GM as he's there. But I think it also stems to the organization. And when you look at that organization, it's been the same ownership since Anthony Davis has been there. Like, things build up, like a culture builds over time. And when I hear something about that, like JJ doing with David Griffin, I can only imagine that was probably similar situations to what happened with general managers beforehand, because of the organization as a whole. So I don't think it would be fair. I think it would dive into a completely different issue if they tried to discipline him on that. So I just don't see discipline happening. And like, to your guys' point, like, he mentions it, like, from the bubble to the short off season to then having to go on the road again and everything, dealing with the pandemic. Like, here's the thing, this is a pandemic. So it's like, I can't blame a guy for wanting to be near his family, because I think if there's anything that the pandemic has taught all of us, it's like, you need to be close to your loved ones as much as you can, because you do not know what could happen the next day. So I can't blame the guy.
Yeah, and that's all fair. So, Kenneth, I want to pose this to you before we move on to the next segment. Do you see any issue, and again, I know that JJ is your guy, do you see any issue with him putting something out there saying that, maybe agents are going to look a little bit harder at the New Orleans Pelicans offers compared to any other team in the NBA?
I don't take major issue with it. I'm sure I'll sound like a JJ homer for that.
No, you're fine.
But I mean, overall, I mean, if you're warning other players not to go to New Orleans, I mean, I think you have every right to do that. Whether he made it public or not, he put it out on his own platform. He clearly chose to post it. I mean, he very easily could have recorded his interview and then decided, you know what, maybe we should cut that part out. But he was clearly passionate about it. And if the NBA has done one thing, it's they've empowered their players to speak their voice. And I mean, ultimately, if they didn't want to run into this situation, then maybe they could have treated the guy with a little bit more respect. A veteran guy that went there, tried to instill his winning culture, because he has a winning culture. He had not missed the playoffs until he went to New Orleans. And he told Zion Williamson, "Don't fuck it up for me." He said that at the press conference. Like, that's his exact quote. And I mean, they missed the playoffs last year. He's probably a little bit frustrated this year that they're not in the position that I think they thought they were going to be. And so I don't blame the guy at all. I think overall, the NBA, if you're New Orleans, you should be looking in the mirror as to why this went public, because you could have given the guy the common courtesy of even giving him a heads up. He didn't even get a heads up. He said that he had to have his wife's phone blow up, and it was in the news. They didn't even let him know. So that's just another example of how they mistreated him in this situation.
Yeah, and that's all fair and good. And just to be upfront, you don't sound like a JJ homer at all. So, all right.
To be fair, I tried to DM him to figure out what his thoughts were with the whole Dallas movie. Hasn't got back to me yet, so I'll keep you guys posted on that.
All right, yeah. When you do let us know, we'll have you on. So, speaking of not sounding like a homer, your new guy, Andre Drummond, for your beloved Los Angeles Lakers, sustained a toe injury, and I've heard read various reports that it's a bruised right big toe, that the toenail came off. I mean, do you have any sort of ear to the ground information regarding Andre Drummond's toe that we might be privy to?
I all that I had heard was that they thought that it was going to be a couple games. I think overall a bruised toe is something that you can get over pretty quickly. If it's the toenail, it might take a little bit more time to figure it out. I'm not too worried about him right now. I would like to see him get in better game shape, because he obviously took some time off in Cleveland, and that was not voluntarily.
Yeah, I was about to say that's not on his own behalf. I mean, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, Cleveland got their center of the future, and they say, "Hey, man, we're going to try to work on a deal for you." Fast forward to a month and a half later, they finally get something done.
Yeah, and overall, I don't think it's necessarily a terrible thing for the Lakers if Drummond misses a couple games. I think giving guys like Montrezl Harrell a bit more time to get familiarized with his new situation there. Dennis Schroeder playing well. They just got Marc Gasol back as well. He was hurt for a little bit there. I think Lakers fans are really panicking because of the AD and LeBron health concerns. As long as they're back with, let's say, 5 games to go before the postseason, they should be fine. I think if you're a common sense Lakers fan, you should know us losing to the Clippers today is just an example of a team being undermanned, taking on a team that they got up for that game. That they want to beat the Lakers. They are the defending champions after all. And if they can just stay 500 over the next little bit here, I think they're like 4-6 over their last 10. If they can just stay around that mark, they should comfortably be in the middle of the Western playoff race. And then you have to beat LeBron and AD in a 7-game series if they're both healthy. So.
Yeah, I agree with that, and good luck with that. I'm of the mindset that the furthest they fall, because of where kind of 4 through 6 lies in the Western Conference right now, I think worst case scenario, they fall to 6th, and right now, if memory serves me correctly, that would line them up against the Clippers in the opening round of the playoffs. That would be kind of
opening round series. Everyone would be tuning into that. I mean, I think the Clippers are going to surpass the Suns, although they are playing really well right now, as long as they can avoid them in the first round. Because if LeBron and AD are coming back with even just a couple games to play, you can't be rusty at all heading into that series. You can't have a game or two to get your legs under you. You got to be ready to go from the tip, and I think that's what they're going to hopefully be doing.
Yeah, because the Clippers just added a guy by the name of Playoff Rondo, so that's they know all too well of how potent he could be when the lights are the brightest and the hottest. So, Jurg, interested to get your take. Andre Drummond comes in; he's promised to be the guy that's going to come in, right, and kind of buoy the Lakers, and in the stead of AD and LeBron James. And then opening quarter of his debut game, he hurts his toe and is only rumored to miss a couple of games. How did you feel about that? Is just bad luck? Like, are the Lakers like drawing a curse now, kind of what the Portland Trailblazers kind of deal with year in and year out? Or obviously I think that you agree with me. Like, people are overblowing this a little bit. Like, if you just pay attention to certain people, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And it's just interesting though how the Lakers have had a number of injuries to deal with so far this season.
Yeah, it's just complete irony, and it's like, to your point, Steven, it's going to be overblown because of the fact that just All-Star break just finished up. Things aren't going to get interesting again until the last 5 to 8 games of the season, where it's like seeding is going to get finalized. So we're kind of in a gray area right now. In hockey, we're experiencing the same thing. So where it's like you're just waiting to get ever so closer to the playoffs, and these networks are going to take these little topics and make them into big talking points. So like I find it, it's ironic, isn't it? It's apropos that Drummond goes down for essentially a lower leg injury. Yeah, I know it's his toe, but it's like him with the toe, Braun with the ankle.
The lowest of lower leg injuries.
Yeah. So, like, as someone who has suffered leg-related health issues the last month and a half of their life, I am very sympathetic to what the Lakers are dealing with right now. It sucks when you have an issue down there. It sucks. But I mean, like you guys mentioned, it's like he was sat however many games in Cleveland, so it's like you talk about the rust that LeBron and AD. Like I know Drummond was practicing and staying in shape, but I always say it is a vastly different thing from just practicing to get in game shape and then finally playing the game. Like it's a different type of synergy that you have, and your body needs to act accordingly. I remember in Ben Simmons' rookie season, when he broke his foot just before the season started, like part of the reason was because I think he gained like 10 to 15 pounds in that offseason. Like that is such a drastic weight gain that that happens. Like your body needs to adjust to that. And that's what happened to him. Joel Embiid early. Like if you're talking about curses, like the Philadelphia 76ers first round draft picks is a real curse. This is just, circumstances and situations. And you know what we say, Steven, situations are situational. So that's all it is with the Lakers. Like they're going to be fine. They're going to get him back. Braun and AD, I think to Kenneth's point, like they're going to come back the last 5 to 8 games in the regular season, get their legs back under them, get back to 100%. And like 4th seed, 5th seed, 6th seed, it don't matter. You're telling me LeBron and AD are standing on the other side of the court against you? I like their odds over dang near every other team in the West.
Yeah, and the counterpoint to this all is like, so all of a sudden the number 1 and 2 seed Utah Jazz and the Phoenix Suns, like they don't matter in the Western Conference anymore. And it's just so funny how, rhetoric and dialogue in NBA circles work is like, well, you can't say something nice about one team and it can not considered to be slander towards another team. Like obviously Phoenix and Utah are having tremendous seasons and it looks sustainable even in the playoffs. But again, when you have LeBron James, that kind of like that sustainment in of itself, whether he wins or he loses, you're probably going to get to the finals if he has a full season. And
look at LeBron in the East. When Toronto was the 1 seed, everyone was like, especially up here, oh man, this is the year. It's like, it's not. Like, if you're an objective NBA fan, you really think DeMar DeRozan is going to be the guy that takes down LeBron James? Like,
you're Al Horford in the Atlanta Hawks.
Like every year it was just like a different 1 seed, and so people will see the Lakers at 4, possibly 5 or 6 come playoff time, and they'll be like, "Oh, this is the year." And it's like until LeBron loses in a 7-game series in a conference game, like in a conference series, then I'm gonna feel pretty confident with LA moving forward.
I'd be terrified if I was the 1st seed and like my 2nd round matchup is LeBron. Like, at least give me the conference finals, man. Like,
you don't even have true home court advantage yet. Like, you may have a couple thousand fans, but
to your point, like all due respect to Utah and Phoenix, especially me, like Steven, my first appearance on your guys' show with you in Austin, it was in the preseason. I said Phoenix would be a top 4 seed, so all the respect in the world to them and Utah as well. But it's like, home court advantage this year is just not the same thing. Like if it was going to be a packed crowd, maybe, but a couple thousand fans, it's not going to make a difference between like LeBron is going to drop 30 on you, whether you got a full house or a half house. Like let's just be
LeBron's gone into other people's buildings and sent them packing in a game 7. Like it's it's the way that his career has gone.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that he's got if all things are clicking right, Anthony Davis is a top 5 NBA player right now, so doesn't hurt to have that dude in your corner. And then Andre Drummond, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys line up. I was hoping you guys would get Hassan Whiteside, but I digress. So
I'm glad we didn't get Hassan Whiteside, so we'll disagree on that one.
Well, that's fine, and we could talk about that offline, but we're kind of up against it, guys. We did have one more topic that I wanted to at least throw out into the ether before we close, and this is in the college ranks here. Legendary coach Roy Williams retires from UNC. He retired on April Fool's Day, and he meant it. He went 18-11 this season after going 14-19 the year prior. That's his career worst as far as coaching record goes. He started his career in the 88-89 season, going 118 and 101 in 15 seasons for Kansas before he then went into the transfer portal and went to North Carolina during the 03-04 season. There he coached for 18 seasons with a record of 485 wins to 163 losses. He is the third most winningest coach in NCAA history with 903 career wins. He's only behind Jim Boeheim, who has 1,083 wins, and then Coach K with 1,170 wins. Kenneth, I know that you're a Duke guy, right? So I know that it's kind of bittersweet seeing a guy like Roy Williams retire for all fans. But Kenneth, just what are kind of your thoughts about seeing him call it a career?
So April Fool's Day was kind of cruel to me as well, because I got trolled on the Twitter timeline of Coach K is retiring, and I saw a couple people post it, and I kind of freaked out a little bit. Luckily, I found out that was April Fool's, and so some people got me on that day. But I mean, I am a Duke fan, so obviously I rooted against Roy for a long time. But that being said, he's one of the classiest coaches I ever had the privilege of watching. Even the dynamic that him and K had in those rivalry games, because those are always the most watched college games every year, is Duke versus UNC. Unfortunately, this year, those games didn't go so well for my Blue Devils. But I mean, if Coach K wasn't an option for my future child to play under, it would have been Roy Williams for me. And I think it's a testament to how great he was as a coach. I mean, I hate the whole he didn't really win at Kansas argument, and then he goes and then he wins multiple national titles at UNC. And I know for a fact the NCAA tournament's the hardest tournament to win in sports. It's not necessarily the best team that wins every year when it comes to March Madness. We've seen that 2015 Kentucky team. I'll say it, they were better than my Duke team in 2015, but they slipped up in one game, and then suddenly you've got a different national champion. And so when a coach wins multiple, I think it's just a testament to how great he is as a coach. The best coaches always win a ton of games, and he was definitely one of those. He's going to be sorely missed from that rivalry. As far as who's going to replace him, I've read Jerry Stackhouse. You know, you might see kind of the Juwan Howard effect of former player comes back to coach as his alma mater. We saw how well that worked. Shout out to Juwan Howard for winning National Coach of the Year.
Patrick Ewing in Georgetown had a heck of a year.
Patrick Ewing in Georgetown. So I'll be interested to see who replaces him there. But I'm going to miss that from the rivalry. I don't know if it's going to be the same next year without him on the sidelines there. I'm sure it'll be a fiery affair, but the interactions between Kay and Roy was always great.
Absolutely. So, Jurg, real quick, kind of same thing to you. What are your thoughts about Roy Williams retiring?
Like Kenneth said, one of the classiest coaches. I think like in college coaching in general, where you talk about a vast majority of these guys kind of undertake this personality where it's like they're all encompassing, they control everything. Roy Williams just never gave that off. He was one of the classiest, most fun coaches. We saw that clip from 2-3 years ago at this point, him jiving into the locker room, having fun with his guys. Like, he's just a good personality. Like, he's the kind of coach you would have wanted to play for, because he was going to get the best out of you and at the same time make you smile and laugh in practice here and there. And that's something that I personally wanted to always do with my with my youth teams that I coach. So at the end of the day, like, college basketball is losing one of its essentially ambassadors, while he was coaching. He's like one of the guys you would push as this is one of our premier coaches. And it's sad for UNC. You feel for them. They've had good coaches, over the last 50 years or so. So I'm sure they'll manage, but it's a different vibe when a legend leaves. And so they're going to feel that they're going to miss his presence for a good year or two, but they'll get back on track.
100%. I mean, there's not going to be a shortage of people wanting that job. Right. So, Kenneth, man, absolute pleasure having you on. We got to do this again. Next time is not going to be soon enough. But before we let you out of here, man, just want to let you give an opportunity to let people know where they can find you and your work.
Definitely. You can find me on all social platforms at shooters_pod. Live show starting here in 6 minutes time. Incredibly excited. We've got our top 5 movie character basketball starting 5, and so it's going to be an exciting one. It can only be from basketball movies and no NBA players, so it's going to be a fun draft, as well as talking about some of the stuff we did talk about here tonight. Steven, thanks so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. You guys are great ambassadors for podcasting, and sports talk in general. And it was a real pleasure sitting down with you guys tonight.
You're too kind, man. And Jurg, just as always, love when you can substitute in. I mean, I love my guy Austin, but if I got to pick another guy to jump on, man, you're number one.
Hey, I always appreciate you guys trust me whenever you need someone to help you out, and that is something I'll say it every single time because I really do appreciate it. In terms of where the people can find me, it's at JurgK40 on Instagram and Twitter to see all the various things of sports that I post about. My NHL power rankings will be coming out tomorrow, which I'm highly excited.
Those are always fun.
Yeah, so they come out tomorrow. And beginning tomorrow, the debut episode.
Yes.
New show to Off the Ball Network. Bunts and Bruises, hosted by myself and our guy, James Barcia, our baseball guy. You can follow him at Bars Talks on Twitter. We're really excited. Bunts and Bruises in reference to us being baseball and hockey fans. And, we're going to promote both those sports on the show and talk. But we're going to cover basketball and football when it comes. So, we're going to, a little variety is the spice of life, guys.
Yes,
so,
sir.
We're going to get everything in there.
That's awesome stuff, man. I can't wait to hear that because you two are some of the brightest minds that Off the Ball Network has. Shout out to Off the Ball Network. Go to offtheballnetwork.com for all of your sports needs. You got great written work there and also outstanding podcasts. And I'll also, before we close, I want to remind everybody, go to manscaped.com. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code BTG. That's easy to remember because that stands for Breaking the Game, the name of the show that you're listening to here on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. At manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code BTG. Unlock your confidence. And as always, use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. All right, fellas, I just want to thank you all. And for all the listeners and viewers that we've had, you guys are all much appreciated too. You're the reason we do what we do. So on behalf of our guest, Kenneth Cotterill here, my awesome co-host today, Jurg and Coney, for the Off the Ball Network, for Manscaped, and all of our great sponsors, for the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. We've been the Breaking the Game show. We will catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.